My name is Denton Joachim from WCP. I'm an Integrated Technology Manager. I would like to introduce Maurice Mwale. He's one of our data analysts. And we're going to be talking about EarthRanger and Cortex. So, yeah.
Thank you, Denton. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far like I am. So our topic today is simply integrating EarthRanger with Cortex Edge. We're trying to leverage data to tackle wildlife and environmental crime to see how best we can use this data and find the insights. So we start off with a quote from Bill Gates. So he's talking about the advance in technology and trying to making it fit in the way we use it in our day-to-day work. So this particular quote really resonates with me because I use tech every day and the advances that are being made every day, but I need to make it fit in how it works with me. So the purpose today of our presentation as wildlife crime prevention is simply to demonstrate the integration of two powerful tools, being EarthRanger and Cortex Edge, and how they can transform the way we analyze our data. And in this particular context, we're talking about finding insights or identifying insights relating to arrested persons. So it's not just about integrating or combining the two software, but also streamlining and enhancing the process, of course, of data analysis. So, what software are we using? We're talking about EarthRanger and Cortex Edge. If I may ask, how many of us in here have used Cortex Edge or EarthRanger? Thanks. Nice. How many have used Cortex Edge? Okay, that's a good number as well. And how many have tried using both of these software together? Okay, and that's the reason why we're here. So when you look at EarthRanger particularly, it's obviously a solution that provides real-time data to aid in information decision-making for wildlife conservation. On the other end, when we look at Cortex Edge, so Cortex Edge is simply a software designed by Semantic AI, so that's why you see that logo there saying Semantic AI. So obviously for data solutions such as data fusion, analysis, and reporting. So what does Cortex do? Right, so Cortex is a similar software to software, I would say, IBM i2, Analyst notebook. Anyone use that one? Cool. It's also similar to Palantir Gotham. So there are quite a number of software, but we at WCP use Cortex Edge for data analysis. Right, so what we want to use Cortex Edge for in this particular case is try to see the connection between different entities, how they link to each other. So how does Maurice link to WCP? How does Maurice link to Zambia? So we want that visual representation of that data and see how each entity links to each other. So we do understand there's so many uses for the software that we're talking about, but I'll go straight to the point and be particular to WCP. How do we utilize the two software? So with EarthRanger, what do we use it for? So we use it for recording arrest and seizure data. So once an arrest is done, information is confirmed, that particular piece of information is recorded into EarthRanger, of course, for storage and other uses. We also use it for the post-release monitoring of pangolins. We want to see the live locations of those pangolins. And we also use it for security purposes, internal security for WCP employees. On the other hand, we're looking at Cortex. What do we use it for? We utilize it for data analysis, and that's why we're trying to integrate the two, because in relation to identifying insights relating to arrested persons, we need to find those links, and that's what we use it for. Data visualization, we want to see that visual representation of a connection from person to person, entity to entity, different types of entity. So with Cortex Edge, you can tell it to how you want to use it. So in this particular case, we're using it to find insights relating to arrested persons. So, how is this integration done? Or why is this integration so important? So, as an analyst, one key thing or one major element in my day-to-day work is time saving. So you would imagine a report is sent to me and I only send it back after 2 days. And the use of that particular report, well, it's normal. No one wants to use it because I'm late. So with this automation or simply integration of two powerful software, what's going to happen is there's going to be that automated data transfer of information from EarthRanger to Cortex, saving me the time in preparing my data, of course. Then we also talk about efficiency in data handling. So redundancy in work obviously would delay me and obviously make me make more errors because I have to get data from EarthRanger, bring it into Cortex, and have to map out that data in my import manager. But with this integration, there will be that efficiency in my data handling. Then the other one that we want to enhance the data analysis capabilities of course, this particular software, which is Cortex Edge. So how do we integrate? That's the question, right? So the magic here that's going to happen is because of what we call the EarthRanger connector. So the EarthRanger connector is simply a plugin that's designed by Semantic AI, so it's inbuilt. Once you get Cortex Edge, you'll be able to get the EarthRanger connector. So what it does is simply interact with EarthRanger. It's simply an interaction between EarthRanger and Cortex, and that's how we bring in that data into our EarthRanger. So let's have a look at how it looks like in Cortex Import Manager. So that's our import Cortex Manager, and the highlighted rectangle there shows the EarthRanger connector. So a simple plugin like that one will help us bring our data from EarthRanger into Cortex without having to do much in data preparation. So let's look at how it works, right? A simple workflow of how it looks like. So an arrest is done. Information is confirmed. We enter that data into EarthRanger as arrest and seizure data. And my job as an analyst is to identify those insights and bring that information into Cortex. So with the help of the EarthRanger connector, it's going to interact with EarthRanger, which is the live platform, and we're going to bring in that data into Cortex for further analysis. So what are we going to do in Cortex, right? I'm going to be looking for those insights. So what I'll do in this particular case, I'll cross-reference past reports, identify those insights, and generate a visual representation. That's a link analysis. Then, of course, I'll not keep that particular report to myself. In order to have informed decision makers, I'll share it with them. So for the next piece, set of slides, that we're going to be looking at, I would like to make a disclaimer that any names, phone numbers, other identifying information used in this particular presentation is merely for demonstration purposes. So if it resembles to real information, it's obviously purely coincidental and should be treated as such. So our next slide here shows the EarthRanger report, how this data is input into EarthRanger. So we have 5 reports there that we're trying to bring in, the data in those 5 reports that we're trying to bring into Cortex. And when you look at, we have 5 reports here, and on the overview there, I opened up one report, and you could see the person who entered that report is Maurice, and we have information relating to an arrested person, the name of the arrestee being Christopher Brown, and all other information relating to him. So how do I bring in these reports or this data into my Cortex for further analysis? So what we're looking at here is simply the Cortex import manager. And among the many sources that we have in Cortex, we're looking at the EarthRanger connector. That's going to help us bring those 5 reports with the data that we're looking to search or cross-reference against our database. And there we have it. Highlighted in that rectangle, you could see the search. So we named it the Cortex arrest for demonstration purposes. And you could see our EarthRanger saver. So this particular connector doesn't really work if you're offline. You really need to be online. So after my import, what do I need to do? I want to send this information into the new network view in order for me to start identifying those insights that we're looking for relating to arrested persons. So there is our data. We've just brought it in. And that's how it looks like once you bring it into Cortex Network Workspace. So you have entity types. So what we did at WCP is bring in all that information, all that data from EarthRanger into Cortex with the help of the EarthRanger connector. So we assigned entity types. So we have entities of persons, we have entities of phone number, we have entities of criminal charges or offenses that relating to the person. So this obviously looks very clustered, and I don't want to work in this. So I decided to filter this data down to the information that would help me find those insights. So in this particular case, on the top, you can see the arrest numbers, of course, generated by EarthRanger. And in the middle section there, you can see the offenses and the persons that were arrested. And at the bottom, you can see the phone numbers and their country of origin, of course, in this case, all being from Zambia. So I have filtered my data. I've gotten the information, the data that I wanted from EarthRanger into Cortex. Now it's time for me to do my analysis. What am I doing? I'm going to cross-reference this data against historical datasets. So with Cortex Edge, you can bring in several datasets into your Cortex desktop analysis software that you can cross-reference from time to time. So that's one of the powerful aspects of Cortex. Then we're also going to uncover patterns, okay? So these patterns obviously between individuals, events, locations, obviously those are the insights that we're looking for. And finally, I'm going to generate my link analysis. That's the visual representation of my findings, and generate a report relating to the same. So what we did is gotten those phone numbers, the names. We started off by searching the phone numbers against historical arrest data just to see which persons of interest are going to pop up or which persons are repeat offenders in this case. So after running my data against the historical data, the data I just imported from EarthRanger into Cortex, I've just found out that, wow, a person by the name of Christopher Brown with that particular arrest number has 3 phone numbers and was previously arrested for unlawful possession of ivory, unlawful possession of leopard skin, right? So we found our person. He's a repeat offender. So I'm just going to show you a Christopher Brown profile in Cortex Edge. How does it look like? So there you have it. That's Christopher Brown. Information relating to him, his address, his date of birth, his nationality. So all this information, all this data is what I got from my EarthRanger. And I brought it into Cortex. So that's how a profile of someone looks like in Cortex. We further went on to search the phone numbers that this person has. We've identified that, yeah, this person is a repeat offender, but we want to understand more. So we searched his phone numbers against our call log data, and that's what we found. So we identified that one of the phone numbers belonging to Christopher Brown actually links to one of the phone numbers of someone that was previously arrested in the past. So this person is called Remington Abdullah. So Remington was arrested also for possession of ivory. So that shows us a link or a visual representation between those two entities. But they're not arrested together, but that information shows us that both have obviously dealt in ivory. And we can also see that there's a phone number that's linking the two. So the two phone numbers, it's either Remington was in contact with Christopher Brown, or Christopher Brown was in contact with Remington Abdullah. And it might happen that it's one person calling the other, or the other calling the other, or simply both words. So based off the searches, we've identified that particular phone number, and now we know that Christopher Brown was actually a problem even prior to arresting him. But with the help of this data, we've uncovered those connections between him and other previously arrested persons. So what's going to happen next is my final network. I'm trying to understand, I've uncovered Christopher Brown. I'm trying to uncover who's Remington Abdullah, just to understand, obviously, the caliber of the people that we've arrested. So Christopher Brown, with the phone number, is obviously linked to Remington Abdullah. So Remington Abdullah is actually a high-level criminal in the wildlife circles. And he's been previously arrested for different offenses, including pangolin scales. Of course, he was in possession of illegal bushmeat and unlawful possession of ivory. And obviously, he's a cross-border illegal wildlife trafficker. So this information was entered way back then through different sources, different types of information that we received. We actually brought this information into Cortex, and now we're using it to cross-reference with the data from EarthRanger that we just brought in. So with that being said, there's several people that are going to benefit from such an integration, right? And I think one of the people that will obviously benefit greatly is a person like myself, an analyst, right? It's gonna save me time of preparing data. So what usually happens, if you want to bring in certain data, you can download it as a CSV from EarthRanger, and that CSV file can be mapped into the Cortex import manager so that you have those entities in Cortex. But in this particular case, you will see that through this integration, I don't have to waste my time downloading that data and obviously having to map out that particular information in my Cortex import manager. Efficiency and consistency. So a standard template used to enter this data, a standard template used to bring in this data will obviously help us develop that consistency and see to it that we don't have those redundancies, and we're going to minimize our errors. So the other people that will benefit, obviously, are the law enforcement officers, the boots on the ground. Obviously, the people that gave us this particular piece of information. So what's going to happen to them is they're going to be well informed, right? A sort of law enforcement officers that are well informed, and that'll be able to make data-driven decisions. Because once a report is generated with these insights, we're obviously going to share this information with them, and they'll be able to see those insights and, in the end, make decisions. So there's going to be improved collaboration between, obviously, the boots on the ground as well as with analysts, because they'll be communicating with each other quite frequently. So if you've been an analyst before, or you are an analyst before, you'd agree with me to say collaboration between analysts and law enforcement, not that it's bad, but it's a bit shaky. But with this integration, we're going to collaborate and communicate more. So in terms of case support, so if you have a legal team or trying to solidify a case, those particular insights that we did identify to say, Christopher Brown is a repeat offender. What's going to happen is, once that information is shared with the legal team, they'll be well informed as well. they can use that information to better support the evidence of that particular case, and obviously with the hope that the case can be won. So I would like to sign off with another quote, probably from Steve Jobs, and he's talking about technology and people, of course. What's important is you have the faith in the people, that they're basically good, smart, and if you give them the tools, they will do wonderful things with them, right? So it's not about having Cortex, it's not about having ER, but it's having the right people behind these tools and giving them the assurance that you trust them, you have the faith in them, that they'll do the right things, and they'll be able to give you the results that you deserve. Thank you.
Any questions?
I'll just say out loud. I'm just interested in potential collaboration across organizations. So would it be possible to have different ER servers coming to the same Cortex Edge so that you can see the same landscape, whether there's interaction between those different events into different EarthRanger servers?
Definitely, that can be done. That's very possible. So, like I showed in the import manager of Cortex. So what we used to bring in that data into Cortex was simply our URL, or simply the type of data set that we wanted to use. So we have our EarthRanger URL that we input into Cortex, and the type of data that we want to bring in. So in case you have EarthRanger and you want me to look at your data, I can simply use your URL and bring that particular data set into Cortex for analysis. So that's very much possible.
I just wanted to find out where you're getting your call log data. Is it from a internet? Is it from a service provider? Where is that information coming from?
Okay, so like I mentioned, there's different data sets. Of course, once that information is confirmed of an arrest and the officers are trying to find those insights, they'll do avail such information to us, and we'll be able to help them get to the bottom of the case. So that information is brought in once it's shared with us, of course, from the arresting officers.
Hi, so just to clarify, when you are accessing, like, for instance, the call data, is there some form of permit that you might need in terms of, like, data privacy or something?
Sorry?
While you access, like, the call, the data that you've just presented, do you need some kind of, like, permit according to, like, whichever country's data regulations and etc.? What about that?
So different countries have obviously different regulations and privacy. So that particular one was just an example of how you could use a call log, right? So it's not that we do get most of these call logs, like, to do our analysis, but a time when the need arises, obviously the paperwork is cleared and all that information is cleared, and we may have access to that particular data.
Cool. Any other questions? Yeah. So Maurice, how configurable is the Cortex with regards to your report templates and like the type of data sources that you can bring in there? Yeah.
So you can configure your Cortex according to your needs. So it depends with the type of data that you're handling. So different organizations have different type of data that they use and how they use. So you can configure Cortex to fit your needs. So in this particular case, we used it for such a case, And if you have other sources of data that you want to bring into Cortex, you can bring them in. But it also depends on the type of setup that you have. So how you want to see those entities in Cortex is how you're going to map that up. But obviously, with you in place, as well as Michelle, one of the people working behind Cortex Edge, obviously do help us develop these entities and see how best we can use Cortex in our setup.
And then I think also a lot of people think about security around like the Cortex databases and stuff. How secure is that database in Cortex? Because obviously we know EarthRanger runs in a server. Yeah, so how does that security work?
So obviously Cortex is a desktop solution, right? But it's got features such as the Cortex server. So you have access to a certain server once you have access to Cortex. So with this server, you are able to give rights to people that are on the Cortex platform. They can be able to see this data. They can be able to read the data. So the authorization level entirely depends with you. So if you want people to edit your networks, you can give them that authorization. Or if you want a read-only access, that can also be given. But the data is entirely stored on your desktop, and it's up to you how you use it.
Thank you. I just wanted to know in terms of ownership for example, Cortex. Do you, as WCP, own it, even though you have the right to, say, authorize who can view your information?
So the authorization is only a security feature that you have as the user of Cortex. But in terms of ownership, we as WCP do not own Cortex. So it's a semantic AI tool developed by Semantic AI. And of course, all these other features, additions are done by them, but we do have that partnership with them, and we interact with them more often.
So for example, if you were to deploy Cortex, you would become the administrator for your specific server. So it's not like we have access to your stuff. It would be a deployment. You manage it from an accessibility perspective. Cool. Thank you very much, guys. If you've got any other questions, just hit up Maurice over dinner.